Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here today with Bruce McCurdy. Hey, Bruce.
Hey, David. How you doing today?
Good. How are you?
I'm pretty well, all things considered. First day of full day of summer.
Is it?
June 21st. Yep. Actually, yesterday, the solstice was last night. So the days are already getting shorter. Today is 1 second shorter than yesterday for amount of daylight, but doesn't seem to be affecting the outside temperature much.
Yeah, I was out there late at night. I through this year I've been going out and running the stairs in the river valley late at night because that's when no one else is there, so I'm not risking anyone else's health by breathing. And so I've been going out late at night, and I've been throughout the whole year, Bruce, I've been carrying a stick with me. I feel a little foolish about it, but there's coyotes down there. You hear them all the time. And I thought, is this stupid? Like, to carry a stick? Is this crazy? But today I read in the paper that there's been 3 coyote attacks in Calgary on human beings.
Wow.
So yeah.
People got hurt?
I don't think so. I just read the first few paragraphs. It looks like one coyote probably. But anyway, I felt a little bit vindicated for carrying that stick all winter. Because it is, I've been reading that they don't attack humans, but I was thinking, geez, just out of an abundance of caution, I just thought. Plus, you're late at night in the valley, you never know what you're going to come upon. So, but there's been coyote attacks on dogs a lot in the River Valley in Edmonton, a number of them. In fact, I witnessed one. I was out with my friend, and his dog went in the bush, and a big coyote just went for his dog's neck, and scared the hell out of that dog. It wasn't serious, but we may have an urban coyote issue. We'll see.
Sounds pretty serious.
Yeah. A coyote that we're more familiar with, Oliver Ekman-Larsson's name has come up again, Bruce. I've been beating on that drum last week, just kind of in a theoretical sense, but I guess Arizona's looking at moving him again. And good luck, Arizona. Like, as much as it was difficult last year, I can't see how any team could view him with having anything but negative value, and Arizona having to eat salary, at least eat salary. I don't know what amount of salary, if not having to pass on negative, like, other assets to move Ekman-Larsson. But I could be wrong. They only need one buyer. I just hope that buyer isn't Ken Holland. I suspect it's not, because Darnell Nurse has stepped up, and you can't have 2 $8 million D men on your left side. You'd think, Bruce? You'd think?
No, you would think. And you would think that Darnell Nurse would be saying, well, I'm better than him, so I need to get more than that 8.25, and now you're raising that bar ever higher.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's I saw a summation from analytics guy Jay Fresh Hockey that rates various categories of players' production, and overall he had Ekman-Larsson in the 5th percentile in terms of value versus contract. That's out of I believe it's versus contract. That's out of the 100th percentile is best, and 1st percentile is the worst. He was in the 5th.
That strikes me as true. Like, he was overpaid by probably, he's probably a $4 to $5 million. He was a second pair lefty defenseman that had okay results, really good results on the power play last year. So he's probably about $3-4 million a year overpaid at this point. Now, he could rebound, but I would prefer some other team take that bet than the Edmonton Oilers, and more, Bruce, today we're going to talk not about OEL so much. We're going to be talking about a bigger problem on the Oilers, which is their depth scoring has been a problem forever, and it continues to be one. And I have a novel solution for this problem, Bruce. At least novel in terms of the Edmonton Oilers.
Okay.
But we're going to look at 2 players specifically, whether Dominic Cahoon and Juju Arcara are in the keep, hold, or fold category. So we'll go through both of them. So you did a post on this, Bruce. Just quickly, what's the damage? How did the Oilers do when the bottom six were on the ice this past season as compared to when, generally speaking, the top two lines were on the ice. And
Mhm.
you're kind of, what's the right word? For the top two lines, your stand-in for that was when Nugent Hopkins, McDavid, or Draisaitl was on the ice.
Mhm.
And then you look at
Any one or
any
two,
one
or
of them.
occasionally all three of the three. Because on any night, you had two of them playing on the top line and the third guy playing on the other line. And so among the three of them, they basically defined the top six. If you just chose McDavid and Draisaitl, well, there would be too many nights where they were together on one line, and then you're defining the bottom nine. Whereas Draisaitl and Nugent Hopkins did this a lot. One moved up to the first line, one moved down to the second, but between them, they were the top six, with three other sidekicks who weren't necessarily hitting it out of the park either. But when the top six was on the ice, the Oilers outscored the other team at 5-on-5 by 91 goals to 71. Tidy plus 20 in 56 games, and that's just at even strength, of course. That doesn't include their phenomenal production on the power play. And very nice, about 56, a little over 56% of the goal share. But anytime those three guys were all three sitting on the bench, and it was one of them was on the ice about 60% of the time, and all three were off about 40% of the time. And in that 40%, the bottom, or what I've been calling the deep six, uh, got outscored by 24 goals for to 45 against, minus 21. So they took that entire plus 20 that the top six generate, and it all went away because they got outscored by 21. So the third and fourth lines, gave in and had the advantage that the first and second lines built up at 5-on-5. Fortunately, because of the phenomenal power play and other different manpower situations, other than 5-on-5, where the Oilers went a spectacular plus 30 this year. So overall, they were plus 29. But that was plus 30 in other situations, plus 20 with top six on the ice, but minus 21 with the bottom six. It's pretty clear where the problem is. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I looked at those same numbers over 2 years since Tippett has been here.
Uh-huh.
And with
More of the
with
same.
McDavid on the ice, just with
Mm-hmm.
McDavid, no one without
Okay.
Nuge or Draisaitl, they have a 52.7 goals for percentage. So that's McDavid playing
That's
with
not that great.
pretty crappy wingers, right? 50,
Sometimes.
52, generally speaking, I think it's fair to say, 52% goals for percentage without McDavid or Draisaitl. Yeah, they're not. He's not playing with. Well, not always crappy wingers. That's he's playing with
Played a lot
post
with Leon.
sometimes. Play well,
Played a lot with Leon, right?
but I'm
But
no
this is
with but
McDavid alone,
this is McDavid
without those guys.
alone,
Right.
without
Gotcha.
Draisaitl or an RNH. So I'm kind of looking at the single player who's really driving it. That's what I was curious about because I wanted to see how these numbers look without RNH, frankly. And so with just McDavid, without Nuge or Draisaitl on his line, he's playing with two other guys, 52.7%. You go to Draisaitl without McDavid or Nuge, he's at 47.7%. That's below 50%, so it doesn't sound very good. But again, remember, he's playing with pretty weak wingers at that point when he's not playing with McDavid or RNH. This is over 2 years in the Tippett era. RNH without McDavid or Draisaitl, Bruce, is at 37.5%. So he's a full 10% lower than Draisaitl in terms of a driver, and he's a full 15% lower than Connor McDavid as a driver. So it's a in some ways it's a bigger problem than just the Oilers have two players who drive things, McDavid and
Mm-hmm.
Draisaitl, and there's really no one else, including Nugent Hopkins, who's a driver and really holding things up in a significant way. I would argue, and I think the
Right.
Oilers need to keep that in mind with the new contract negotiations. I think they are. Bruce, let's talk about. So there's a problem clearly in the bottom six. Maybe even the bottom nine.
And
Um,
here's the problem as well, David. I mean, this was last year, where I mean, the Nuge was in the methodology just to separate out the bottom six, as mentioned
yeah, I
earlier.
know.
So my
Yeah,
friend Darcy McLeod does it that way, and it makes perfect sense to me because that's what you
you
get.
get to the bottom
But
six.
the same setup for since 2017 when they traded out Jordan Eberle and they bought out Benoit Pouliot and they soon thereafter traded out Patrick Maroon and 2017-18, 37.7% for that bottom six.
Yeah.
18-19, 36.6%. 2019-20, that's the high water mark, 38.2%. And then this year's brutal 34.8%. It's a problem, and it's a persistent ongoing. Less than 40% in any of these metrics is terrible. And if you're looking at like a bunch of players over full seasons and they're consistently less than 40%, that is terrible. It has to be dealt with.
So, why don't I get to my novel solution since we're on this
Sure.
subject? Bruce, if you look at Tampa
I
Bay's
have.
roster, they have Tyler Johnson,
Mm-hmm.
Andrej Palat, Alex
Mm-hmm.
Killorn, Anthony Cirelli, Donnie Gord, and Matthew Joseph on the team. These players all have one thing in common. They all played a year for at least 1 year for Syracuse. The Syracuse Crunch, their main farm team. They all
Mm-hmm.
played at least 1 year. Some of them played two. Gord
Mm-hmm.
played three or four. And they were all pretty good scorers down there. They
Mm-hmm.
all ripped it up in the AHL and they had success. And they were all pretty much all of those guys, I'm going to say, are also kind of skill players. They do the two. Some of them are better two-way players than others, but all of them have a high level of skill. And then they all got an opportunity to show in Tampa. They valued the skill that these players brought.
Yep.
They brought them up and they got jobs. And this is how they have solved their depth issue all the way through the lineup, from top of the lineup to fourth line.
Yep.
The Oilers have right now, three players who kick butt in the American Hockey League. Three skill players on the same line: Ryan McLeod, Cooper Marody, and Tyler Benson. And
I hear you.
people were beating the drum, me and others, this winter. Like, call them up. And
Mm-hmm.
finally they called one of them up. And it was difficult, I understand,
Yes.
because of COVID.
Yes.
I get that, and we won't talk about next winter. Bruce, they have got to be thinking.
Mm-hmm.
These three players could be their Yanni Gourds. This could be their Andrej Palat.
Mm-hmm.
These kinds of players. But if they do not give them a chance, if they continue to hold to, let's have grinders on those, let's
Mm-hmm.
have role players
Yep.
instead of players who are young players who did well at the AHL, have high skill. Why not have that as your fourth line next year? Do you think that the McLeod was
Because they don't kill penalties, David.
McLeod was plus 23, Benson plus 14, Marody plus 17. Generally speaking, that line of like every second game was plus one or
Better.
at even strength or
Yeah.
even better than that. So better than
Yeah.
that probably. Could that line, if you brought that line up as your fourth line this year, Bruce, you play
Mm-hmm.
them 10, 12 minutes a game at even strength. What's the chance that they're going to be closer to 50% goals for percentage than 35 goals percentage? Can they do better than 35 goals for percentage?
I would
I'm going to
surely hope
say,
so.
I'm just going to be crazy here, Bruce, and say they could get to 45% goals for percentage. Those three players, you play them as a line regularly, high skill line. I think they could do it. I've seen them all play hockey. I've seen them play
Mm-hmm.
together. They're not going to get caved in
Right.
like the Oilers group has. Now, I'm okay if there's some variation. Maybe it's 2
Of
out of 3 on
course.
the line. But they've got to give these guys a chance. And I hope that's in the plans for the Edmonton Oilers this year. Don't I know that they've had this strategy of bringing in tons of, Granlunds and Devon Shores and other players like Gaetan Haas, Nygaard. And I think that was an interesting strategy. I think it had its moment in Edmonton.
Mm-hmm.
That moment has passed. And
They're
now is the
gone.
moment. You have developed three
Mm-hmm.
highly skilled players who can attack and kick butt in the AHL.
Mm-hmm.
It's incumbent on you. If you are a competent organization at this point, I say you give them a chance. I'm going to write a post on this tonight. That's my argument. What do you think?
Yeah, I've looked long and hard at that Tampa Bay organizational structure with a tremendous amount of envy, I have to say, as a fan. Uh, in honesty, Tampa Bay has been my number two team for almost 20 years. I've liked them since they had Marty St. Louis, and I've just kind of followed them. So I know the team a little bit. Now, those guys, you named six guys. Pretty sure every one of those guys has played their entire career in Tampa Bay, right?
Yeah,
None of them has moved around the NHL before they went to Tampa. They got Gord and Johnson as free agents. They got
yeah,
Killorn and Palat and in ridiculous late rounds of the draft. But they took the time to. They saw the talent. They took the time to develop the talent. As you say, a full year or more in Syracuse. I mean, they did the same thing with their coach, for goodness sake, and they developed him in the minors. And
yeah.
they brought those guys up, and you know what? They wound up paying like four of those guys are making on the order of $5 million. I
In the
think
end, yeah.
Killorn, Gord, Johnson, Palat, they're all within a few hundred grand, one side or the other, of $5 million. They're getting paid, but what they do in Tampa is they develop their own talent, and when they succeed, they pay those guys. It's like motivation. It's the carrot at the end of the stick kind of thing. That if you do perform, we're going to treat you well, and they treated those guys well. And just about, I think the only outsider in the entire organization that has like a very significant cap hit, unless you want to talk about Mikhail Sergachev, who they traded for after he played 4 games in the NHL. So they basically developed him too. But the only outsider that came to them as a veteran that's getting paid is Ryan McDonough, where they went out and got, and traded for, targeted a specific player type that they needed. And they paid that one guy. But almost all of their 178 million in payroll or whatever it is right now, which is another matter. Don't get me started on cap circumvention in Tampa Bay. But of all their payroll, almost all of it, they're just given to guys that came up and grew up in their own system. And in
Yeah,
Edmonton,
Bruce.
we have nothing like that. I keep saying, we got Jujar Kara, who's going into his draft plus 10 year. He's got 250 NHL games under his belt, and at best, he's an average player, right? Like he's not going to push the needle the way Yanni Gord and Andre Palat and Tyler Johnson have pushed the needle.
It is frustrating.
Oh,
It is frustrating. And what is the obsession? And I'm not just gonna single out Oilers management here. Okay. I'm gonna single out
sure.
us, Oilers fans. What is
Mm-hmm.
our obsession right now? Every bright, shiny free agent you name that's
Mm-hmm.
bandied about is like, we gotta get, I see these lineups like, okay, Hyman in here and Dougie Hamilton in there, like these huge salaries um, to be. Why can't we develop? Zach Hyman is leaving his prime as an NHL hockey player. He's leaving it. He could easily be the new David Clarkson. A player who signs a massive contract and then isn't nearly that and is a terrible bet. Easily be that. Why not try to say, okay, Tyler Benson, go for it. This is your moment, and you've earned it, and we're going to give you that opportunity, and we'll see how you do. Like, I'm not against the odd acquisition, but I just think the whole focus in Edmonton is this: let's get a big UFA, let's get a big UFA, let's get a big UFA. Now, I'm not saying Holland's saying that. Ken Holland was saying,
No,
I think he's talking about internal development as being, and I think that's exactly the right thing. I think the cap space is a mirage that the Oilers have. It's much less
largely.
than most people think.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's like, oh, $30 million. No, it's think about it.
Yeah,
If these
20
players
million of
develop,
it is spent. Yeah.
if these players develop like Nurse has and Pulley, Arvey, Might,
Mm-hmm.
and Yamamoto and Bear and Caleb Jones and on and on and on, you're going to need that money to keep these players. If you go big on a contract for a free agent, you're not, and someone else comes through, you're not going to have the money to pay them. So
Mm-hmm.
I very quite quickly, like, you have the money right now, but one summer from now you won't. So I'm really in favor of the Tampa model, which was based on the Detroit model. Ken Holland is the architect of the Detroit model. I favor him sticking with that. That's my vote, and I'm not really big on the free agent thing, honestly, Bruce.
But the trouble is, the pressure's on because it's now McDavid's draft plus 7 season, for goodness sake, and Draisaitl's draft plus 8. Can we wait for a bunch of young guys to develop and form a secondary cast? And to me, I mean, you're talking good common sense because the other plan clearly hasn't worked very well for quite a long number of years now. And with one exception, 2016-17, a club that was actually 4 lines deep, but that went away. And they uh, uh, they haven't solved it with its external guys. When you sign them as free agents, you have to pay them way more than guys that are coming up through the system that are on entry level or bridge contracts, and it's it's hard to get continuity on the team. Like
Yeah,
Tampa Bay, you're looking at the same players. Like I'm watching New York Islanders. You look at the Islanders and saying, "Geez, that's the same team they had last year. Almost all the guys are the same in the year before." And some of them have been there 8, 10 years now. And there's a real sort of core group of that guy's an Islander, and he may not be a great player. He might be Casey Kazikis or something, but he's an Islander, and he's always been an Islander. He's always played that role. He's part of the face of the team, and the Oilers have got just precious few those kind of players, with the exception of the high first round draft picks that they've nurtured along the whole way. But of guys that
yeah.
developed in the minors, came up, paid their dues, came in the fourth line, moved up to the third, and so on. It's a short list.
We talked last time about the core 12 players, like the top 7 forwards on a team, the top 4 Ds, and the number 1 goalie. And there's a lot of players right now drafted in the 5 years who have potential to be core 12 players. Good teams will consistently bring in a core 12 player outside the first round about every second year. And the Oilers have done it twice, Bruce, since in this century. They did it with Jarrett Stoll and with Jeff Petrie. That's it. They anyway, you brought up a good point. We're in the McDavid, the McDavid era. We got a rush thing. That was always the thing with Chiarelli. We're gonna jump start things by trading picks for Griffin Reinhart. We're gonna bring in Milan Lucic. We're gonna bring in veterans, Andrei Sekera. So we've been doing this. And, it happened in Holland's first year when he traded for Athanasiou. Same idea.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a younger player, so it's a little bit different category, as was Reinhardt. But anyway, this hasn't worked. The thing about it is, Bruce, I would argue that this year, for the first time, if you're going to go with, let's say you're going to go with the internal development model, you actually have good candidates this year. You actually have some players like it was just Benson, Marody, McLeod line. These are all guys who have been 3 years, 2 years, 2 years in the AHL.
Right.
Veteran AHL players who have had consistent success now at that level. All of them decent prospects. In terms of defense, we saw what happened this year. Evan Bouchard, not a bad idea bringing in Tyson Barrie, but he got blocked. So if you bring in a bunch of guys, if you trade for that third line center instead of trusting Ryan McLeod, taking a risk, or trusting Ryan McLeod, if you trade, you're blocking them. You will block if you bring in another defenseman, Dougie Hamilton. You block Evan Bouchard. So this is the model. This is the Edmonton model, and I don't think in the past you weren't blocking players because they weren't that good.
Right.
These players are kind of good. Like they've shown enough. There's statistically, when you look at their numbers and their ages, they line up very well with the Tampa guys who had breakthroughs and have become top, contributing players on that team. So I think that this is a good year. If you're going to go with development, this is a good year to say, yeah, let's have the courage of our conviction and be that organization as opposed to the one that's always chasing the shiny thing.
So back to the core 12, and because I know you're running against the deadline, David. I had identified both Dominic Cahoon, second line left winger, and Jujhar Khaira, third line center, effectively this year, was somewhat debatable, as actually being in the core 12. And now both of those guys are restricted free agents and on the cusp of 26 years old. They have 1 year left. They both have arbitration rights. And we have two very different players. One who actually was developed by the Oilers, drafted in 2012, third round, and one who was brought in as a free agent, sort of quick fix. At least he was cheap. And at least he was 1 year. It wasn't like we brought him in 4 years, $4 million. It was 1 year under $1 million. Which brings him up to decision time already. And we have to decide on both. Not we. I mean, we can talk about it, but the Oilers have to decide on what to do with both. And there's a couple of common cases here. Both of them have arbitration rights. So if the club issues them a qualifying offer, and those guys decide to take them to arbitration, it's out of their control, because then the arbiter decides on the salary, and the team, they're in a low enough echelon that the team just has to accept it. So if the arbiter looks at Dominic Kuhn's statistics say, oh yeah, no, he's worth 2 million. They have to deal with that. So I think in both cases they want to, if they're going to keep these guys, they want to actually sign them, not just qualify them before the deadline. But what do you think? Do they want to keep both guys, either guy?
I'm just really on the fence with both of them, Bruce. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll go hold with both.
Mm-hmm. Fair.
Cahoon is a smart player, good with the puck, responsible defensively. In a third line role, maybe he makes sense.
Right.
I didn't particularly like him with Draisaitl or with McDavid in the end.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't mind him with McDavid actually. I would have liked to see more of that earlier in the year. To see if they could have developed more chemistry. I think
Yes.
they had a little bit of it, but it was hard to know. So I'm not dead set against Dominic Cahoon. Like let's say you had a fourth line of let's say Marody, McLeod, and Cahoon, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
That could work. That might be an interesting fourth line to throw out there. I'm not so, but he's not a must keep, Bruce. He's a
Right.
minimum. He's $1 million player. You don't want to give him a raise. You don't want to give him arbitration.
Right.
You just because he did have a good season 2 years ago where he had
He did.
2.3, 2.2 or 2.3 points per 60. Like he kind of a second line level of scoring. This
Mm-hmm.
year he was like 1.4. So he's kind of like third or fourth line level of scoring. But
Mm-hmm.
he's a smart player and he doesn't hurt you defensively. Not particularly. I think he's an okay player, so I'm okay if they bring him back. But right now it would definitely be hold.
Yeah. Well, he is. I'm looking at the last 3 years at Natural Static players with 1,000 forwards with 1,000 minutes, and it's just it's 380 something, and there's like 372
Yeah.
forwards in the league, and he ranks 109th with a 1.88 points per 60, so a very solid second line rate, and he's a goal and primary assist guy. Like that's where he gets most of his points, are the so-called primary points. He does his damage in tight to the net. So I didn't see him as an outperformer in a top six role this year, but I'm kind of with you. Like we can't lump him in with the guys in the bottom six that didn't get the job done because he really wasn't a bottom six. He was top six or bust. And when Tippett didn't play him, he put it on the top two lines. He put him in the press box. He didn't even try him down low. So that might be a tip that the Oilers don't see him as that kind of player, and they will let him go.
Yeah, I mean, this goes to Tippett. Like
It
he talked
does.
last year at the start of last year about having three scoring lines and a fourth line. I think if I'm recalling correctly, that passed his lips, but it didn't really come to fruition. It didn't come to reality. I think they've really got to just get four good lines.
It
I don't.
may have passed his lips, but it didn't pass the smell test.
Not in the end, did it? We didn't. We certainly didn't see that. We saw so Cahoon could be your Archibald kind of player this year, excuse me, Cahoon could be your Ennis player this year.
Right.
That guy who's in and out of the lineup, who gets a chance at different things, and you see how he does. And if he steps up and can match that old level of scoring, he'd be a useful player. So I'm not against Dominic Cahoon. I don't think he would take them to arbitration. Like if he got a contract, so we'll see what happens there. I just think,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, just negotiate a new deal with him. And the same with Kara. Like Kurt Levins, our Cult of Hockey colleague, was saying, he was saying the Oilers will probably qualify
Mm-hmm.
Jujar Kara.
Mm-hmm.
Man, we've been through a lot.
We
Fans,
have.
Jujar Kara has been through a lot in Edmonton. He looked like he was finally a player. And there's been other moments like this in his career where he's looked like he's finally a player. He had that great 6 weeks here in Edmonton on a third line with Archibald was on one wing and sometimes Ennis and sometimes Shore. And he looked really good. But then he got hurt, a couple
Punched
injuries to
out.
the head, and he didn't look the same after that. So that's a little concerning. You don't know what should you hold, how much to hold that against the player. Like he
Mm-hmm.
finally takes a step up, he gets an injury which is a recoverable injury and steps back. So if they qualify him, I'm not going to scream bloody murder because I think he's an okay bottom line player. But Bruce, it strikes me like I think I'm ready. Like I would rather see Ryan McLeod than
Mm-hmm.
Jujar Kara in the lineup. So they already have Shore as your
Right.
your center winger guy. That's what Jujhar Khaira is. Do you want him as your fourth line center?
I would qualify Kara over Shore myself, but
There you go. Yeah.
I'm not the GM. But uh, for all that the bottom six needs to be changed out, Kara is, in my mind, these are my personal biases, which I've expressed for a number of years here. But he's in
That's
my
your
mind
job.
the one guy you don't want to get rid of because he's the one guy that actually did come up through the Oilers system. That's one of those, all those Lightning guys that we talked about earlier. I bet you one or two of them has got a Lightning logo tattooed somewhere on his anatomy, right? And Kara is one of those players. He's been an Oiler for a long, long time, establishing himself very oh so glacially, getting better year over year from his amateur days to his long time in the AHL to finally making it in his second contract as an NHLer. And he does have uses. He can play winger or he can play center. He has value as a penalty killer. To me, he's coming as a face-off guy. He plays very physical. Like I think he led the Oilers in hits per 60 this year. For the minutes that he had, he was just hammering the body all the time, even more than Archibald. He just didn't have as much ice time, and uh, I think he's a useful player. The qualifying offer would be 1.3 million. I'm not sure they would go any higher than that. I mean,
It's a lot
you
of
know,
money for Jujhar Khaira, frankly.
well,
I'm in the kind of I'm in the
mhm.
kind of a that's a lot of money
But
for Jujhar
that's the
Khaira
the
category.
hold position is your issue at the existing base. So
Well, hold can be we're not qualifying you, but we're negotiating with you to keep you at 1 million
right,
or eight hundred
yeah,
thousand. That would be my
yeah,
hold on
okay.
Jujhar Khaira. That's what I would recommend. Like, don't give him a
Well,
raise.
well, Holland was the guy in July 1st of 2019. He signed Kara to a 2-year extension at that time with a significant raise. I think he went from 650,000 league minimum at that time to an average of 1.2. So he almost doubled his rate, and maybe it was an overstep, but I guess that's what it took to get the deal done. But
You can keep uh, you can keep Kara,
mhm.
and you can move out Turris, Ennis, and Chase on, and bring in
Oh,
Benson, Marody, and McLeod. So that's the trade you could in the bottom six. That's one of the possibilities. You move again. Turris, Ennis, Jason are gone. Benson, Marody, and McLeod are in their place, and it's you're getting rid of kind of I don't role players, I guess, whatever they were. I mean, I like Chase on, and I didn't mind Ennis,
the other
but I
issue is you need role players for your special teams, and that Tippett put a big emphasis on special teams, and maybe that was something I should have mentioned in the article. Was of these bottom sixes, the one facility they did have, which showed up on the goal differential, was Edmonton's power play was much better than the other team's power play, which is credit in part to Edmonton's penalty killers. Like Edmonton scored 48 power play goals and they allowed only 27. That's a nice gap.
Turris, Ennis, and Turris and Ennis don't really have special team roles. Chase on
Right.
obviously does on the power play,
Yes.
but I think he can be, and he did it exceptionally well. But I think Puljujärvi can take that role and do a close
Should be
as
ready.
should be ready. So I'm not that worried about that particular role. Bruce, I do have to get going here, so
Hmm.
we'll just have to leave it there. So sorry, guys and girls, guys and gals
Hold,
for
hold, and
cutting this
hold.
short. Yeah,
I think we both said the same thing.
hold and hold. Yeah,
So, so yeah, it's just the trouble with this bottom six. So many guys on the cusp, eh?
yeah.
But anyway,
Time to move them out. Time to change. All right, Bruce. Thanks for talking today.
thanks for listening, everyone.
And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast.